When the Chicago Bulls hired Arturas Karnisovas after the NBA had suspended their season due to the pandemic in 2020, a lot of us Bulls fans were elated at the news that finally, after years and years of dysfunctional management, toxic environment, that the era of Garpax had ended, and a new day, a new era of Chicago Bulls basketball would be ushered in by a pretty well-respected GM that had brought the Denver Nuggets to title contention. And we had all hoped that AK and whoever he would eventually hire as part of his executive team would bring this franchise back to respectability and relevancy. And hopefully, not right away of course, but hopefully would bring the city of Chicago a championship once again. But after 5 years at the helm, AK has only brought the fans one playoff appearance, just one single playoff win, and 3 straight play-in exits. And going into this offseason, the Bulls really aren't any closer than where they were before to bringing this team back to title contention. Now, I don't need to rehash all the missteps, mistakes, and bad decisions that have been made thus far in Arturas' tenure. We already know that. We've discussed those before. And while I know a lot of you are already out on AK in this front office in general and wanting them out of the picture, I, on the other hand, while still critical of this front office, I've been known to come to their defense at times and often try and rationalize and justify some of their moves. And with the way the Bulls had closed out the season, the vibes and excitement around this team with a younger group had me thinking, okay, maybe there's something here. But after a recent decision that came shortly after the Bulls' play-in loss against Miami, a decision that for some reason has really hit me hard and has brought me back to the dark past of the Bulls' former regime. And yes, I'm talking about the Bulls firing their head of player development and shooting coach guru in Peter Patton. Now, I know this news is a little bit old at this point. This obviously happened right before the start of the weekend, and I had planned to talk about it then, but honestly, I needed a break talking about this team. And of course, with it being Easter weekend, I decided to spend some time with my family. But even after the weekend, this whole thing still hasn't sat well with me. And it's weird because you think, really, of all things that AK has done, this is what sets you off? This is what has driven you over the edge? Well, first off, my faith in AK was already dwindling as it is. Oftentimes, it's one small thing on top of a lot of big things that set you over the top. But two, even all the questionable decisions, even despite the lack of vision, strategy, and goal for this team, at the end of the day, I had the belief that at a minimum, they were creating a better environment, a better culture, a non-toxic culture than what the front office that preceded them had created. A front office that was not well respected by other executives around the league and even their own organization all the way down to the players. In my view, this front office, the new front office, was going to be a players-first organization. No backstabbing, no secrets, open line of communication, everyone being on the same page. Like, even if the overall direction wasn't good, even if I didn't like some of the personnel moves, at least internally it wouldn't be like what it was under Garpax. And with a move like this, a firing like this, especially with the reports coming out about why, reminded me back to the Garpax days and how nothing at the top of the organization has really changed. Now, reports indicated that the reason Patton wasn't brought back was because he was very vocal in how things were being handled, the direction of the team, the development of the players, and what players needed to focus on most. Opinions that did not align with Arturas Karnisovas and the rest of the front office. Now, a lot of these reports initially came out from Joe Cowley, which I always say, take what Cowley says with a grain of salt, as he's known to troll and be a contrarian and seems to get off more when this team fails rather than when they succeed. But I did reach out to some of my contacts around the beat to confirm whether or not this was true, and they did confirm this to be the case, that Patton was ruffling feathers a bit, was rubbing people the wrong way, and at times being insubordinate. Now, as Cowley put it, he wasn't a yes man, and if you remember, if you weren't a yes man under Gar Forman, you were let go, creating this toxic, dictatorial leadership style that gave the Bulls this reputation of being a franchise you don't want to play for. Now look, we don't know all the happenings behind the scenes. We don't know if Peter Patton was out of line in his approach. We don't know if he was being openly insubordinate. But what we do know is the players were not happy about the firing. In fact, the term that was used by Cowley was they were angered and pissed off. Josh Giddey, shortly before the firing, posted on IG a picture of him and an angry emoji next to his picture. And then Kobe White, I was at the game where Kobe accepted his Eastern Conference Player of the Month award, and in accepting that award and giving a brief speech, he brought Peter Patton up with him. And as on multiple occasions throughout the season, praised Patton for being a big reason for his improved play, for making him into a more confident player, a more versatile scorer, and that was the same sentiment that was felt across other players around the organization, that Patton was instrumental with their overall development. And to me, when you do something that is going to set off the players, like what Gar Forman and John Paxson used to do a lot, like when they traded Dang, fired Tom Thibodeau, always stood by Jim Boylan when the players hated that guy, when you do things like this, You lose the trust and respect of your players, you negatively impact the morale of your team. And it puts into serious question of, well, what the hell is going on here? We're talking about a year where we're focusing on player development, calling it a youth movement. One of the primary goals was developing internally. Say what you will about the Bulls season, but one of the biggest positives that came away from it was seeing the improvement of their younger players, especially from the start of the season to the end of it. Josh Giddey took a huge leap from the beginning of the season and what we saw last year. Kobe White continued on his improved play from last season and finished the year with his best season on record for his career. We saw amazing strides in Modest Bucelis, who hardly played at the beginning of the season and was a legitimate NBA starter by the end of it. Julian Phillips, hell, even Dalen Terry finally started showing some strides in his overall development. When one of the few good things you did this season was development of your young players, one of the few things you can be proud of and hang your hat on for the year, then yeah, you might want to hold on to the guy that heads up your player development. Any good vibes, any positives you ended the season with, especially in those final 2 months, is now washed away by doing an unexpected firing like this. Now, to be fair, I'm sure it wasn't all Peter Patton that was responsible for the improved play and development of the team. There's obviously multiple people who work on the staff, whether it's the coaching staff, training staff, etc. I don't think it can all be attributed to Peter Patton, but one thing Patton is well known for is improving a player's shooting. The Bulls, when they were one of the worst shooting teams in the league just 2 years ago, they said, okay, we got to do something to figure out our shooting woes. We've got to become a better three-point shooting team and adapt to modern NBA basketball. We need someone that will focus in on this area. When you look at the numbers and the shift in the Bulls' overall shooting prowess from last year, the numbers don't lie. The Bulls 2 seasons ago were the lowest volume three-point shooting team in the league and bottom 5 in shooting efficiency from deep. They upped that number slightly last season, being 26th in the league in three-point volume and 20th in three-point shooting percentage, but still second to last in three-point rate, which is the percentage of field goal attempts you take from three. They went from that to this season, where they were 3rd in the league in three-point volume, 3rd in the league in threes made, 12th in three-point percentage, shooting above league average at 36% from deep, and were top 5 in three-point rate, shooting 45% of all their shots from three-point range. Now, yes, most of this can be attributed, or some of it anyway, can be attributed to the Bulls no longer having DeMar DeRozan, so naturally the overall system of their offense changed to enable them to shoot more threes, but then you look at the individual players and how much their shooting improved, particularly from players who aren't known for their three-point shooting or in general aren't known for being shooters. Josh Giddey, one of the biggest weaknesses of his game was his three-point shooting. He went from shooting 33% to 38%. And did so on the highest volume of his career. Giddey also finished the season with the highest true shooting percentage of his career at 57%. Vucevic was one of the worst three-point shooters in the league last season. Literally, bottom 10 on players who shot more than 4 attempts from three. Shot 29% from three last season, and then this season he shoots the best of his career at over 40%. Dalen Terry, who has been horrendous of a shooter throughout his career, went from shooting 23% to 36%. Julian Phillips finally started knocking down threes at a solid clip for a player who came into the league as that being one of his greatest weaknesses. How about Modest Bucelis? Same thing. One of the biggest question marks when it came to his prospect profile was his shooting. Struggled initially, but eventually finished 36% from three when he shot sub 30% in the G League Ignite. Now, to be fair, we did see some shooting regression from Patrick Williams and Ayo Dosunmu, but at the end of the day, the team had drastically changed its shooting profile. It had finally looked like it had some pieces to work with and could be happy with their overall player development. And then right at the end of the season, they fired the guy who was instrumental in making that happen. I just don't get it. And it's really frustrating for me as a fan because I feel like this is Garpax all over again when we spent years trying to do away with these guys. Anyway, we'll see what else comes of all of this as the Bulls embark on a very critical offseason that already hasn't gotten off to a good start. But anyway, let me know what you guys thought of the firing. Let me know in the comments. As always, be sure to subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.